and subscribe, and my stories will thrive. Welcome to another video by the Blue Tongues of Hell for some more Hildar Chronicles. This 20th chapter is called Monsters in the Fog. A young blonde girl named Liv, with deep blue eyes and freckles all over her face, looked after Nabori while his parents were away. Nabori hadn't spoken since the death of his brother Pekar and stillborn sister Niji. He barely ate, and when he wasn't sleeping, he stared through everything like the world had become transparent. Even the cuboid pillar tombstones near the wall outside his home, where Pekar and Niji had been buried. Nabori didn't mind or dislike his babysitter, who had a stronger smell of vinegar than most Helheimers, due to her working in the local fermentation barns. After her parents were killed when the Drogs freed the town, she replaced her mother at the barns and often reeked of malt vinegar when she came home early in the morning. Liv frequently slept in the coastal home when Asmund would go missing, or Kyoko was staying out all night doing hell knows what. Liv did not complain. She had nobody to go home to, and this little boy needed her. Hilda showed up a few days after Gunnar's demise, as if she had gone out for a stroll. She was even colder than usual, and had no interest in explaining where she had been or why she had left the little Nidhogger behind. Their child had been in good hands, Hilda had protested. That was until Estrid had been enslaved, and all children rounded up in the castle for Gunnar to play with. At least little Nid had been too young for Gunnar's games, and was well looked after by the king's nannies, who prepared him nonetheless for what awaited him. On this summer evening, Hedil stayed indoors. The moon was nearly full, and the hot air was moist and stuck to the skin. Hilda was in another sour mood. She couldn't stand all of these Drogs living amongst them in Helheim, since all the Vanaheimer traitors had been kicked out. Her ex-subjects weren't executed or forced into slavery like the Helheimers had been, but given a chance to get back to Grönelger Castle alive, if they found a way through the hearts of the undead. Hilda knew she didn't belong here, not with these beasts or pathetic people who stank of vinegar. I sometimes wonder, Hilda, why you can't stand these Drogs living here, said Hedil. I just can't. All they do is hang around like filthy mongrels, frustrated and out of place. They don't belong here. You mean they remind you of me, don't they? Or do you mean of me, the traitor of Vanaheim? I bet you'd love to see me go missing again, so you wouldn't have to look over your shoulder whenever you sneaked out to see the ghost whisperer.
Oh, enough, Hilda. We're soon to be wed as king and queen. Does that not appeal to you? I don't know what you want anymore.
All is fine, king of drogs and men. Go fishing or scratch a trunk for all I care. I need to rest. Leave me be. Edil shook his head and gave the Nidhogger a worried look.
Take care of him.
The king of Helheim left Hilda to her bitterness and joined Refr and Harald in the castle's main hall to talk of the island's infection. Asmund was not out hunting or preparing charcoal paste in hundreds of barrels to use against the undead. The only place he found solace of late was at the jolly Jormungandr. It struck him as odd to be drinking away his sorrow in a tavern that bore the same name as the beast that he had fought at sea and who had killed some of his friends. But he understood the amusing metaphor of one's thankful throat as the ale ran down it.
Refill!
Boomed Asmund's voice over the small crowd of late-night residents of the jolly Jormungandr. He bellowed another request and thought of a more effective way of getting what he wanted when the red-haired barmaid didn't skip over to his table and dangle her long plaits in front of his sweaty face to pour him some more ale. Now, Brodir. No need to chop anyone's head off tonight. Is this what you were looking for? Said Hilda, who had sneaked out after telling Hedil to get lost.
Oh, sis dear, to the rescue,
said Asmund, grabbing the beer mug and spilling a splash of froth over her skeletal hands. He soaked his black beard in ale and clumped the mug on the oak wood table.
Oh, sis, I've missed you so.
Blood is thicker than water, isn't it? Replied Hilda, tossing a small glass vial under the table. What's wrong, Brodir? Does your exotic wife not make you happy? Hedil tells me so much about her. You should be delighted, despite the tragedy, of course. Asmund picked up the beer mug and emptied its barley contents down his gullet. His senses were blunt, and he didn't notice the additional bitter taste of black henbane poison that Hilda had dropped into his beverage. It didn't really matter how drunk Asmund was, because henbane was often used in small doses to enhance the flavour of ale. So this was a simple mistake of dosage. This place is dull as ditch water, don't you think, Brodir?
Right, Heldar. Let's get out of here,
Asmund said. His speech was slurred, and when he tried to get up, his heart started to beat irregularly. That didn't slow him down, and he punched his chest a few times. He stumbled past Hilda, fondled the barmaid's breasts, and bashed the door open, letting in a wave of fresh, salty air from the southern sea. Hilda apologized for her brother and guided him towards a stream that ran through town. Next to the vinegar barns was a stone bridge where lovers would meet and kiss, especially when the moon was out on such a warm and beautiful evening. It was around midnight, and Hilda sat Asmund down on a stone bench to admire the view. She pointed out a couple enlaced on the bridge ahead of them, bleached in the almost full moon. The man's blonde hair was tangled in the obsidian locks of the smaller woman as he pressed his lips against hers. Look, Asmund, see how your beloved's tongue slides around the king's mouth. Do you think she's cleaning his teeth for him with her pink tongue? Or is my Hedil touching her thighs to see if she's put on weight? I'm sure the after effects of miscarriage won't prevent him from carrying her as he sticks it inside her. Asmund was confused at first, then gradually saw the face of Kyoko disappear into Hedil's. Her lips trembled, and she shamefully slid her small hands into Hedil's trousers. Watch Kyoko's slimy tongue coiling around my husband's. See how she disrespects you every time you leave the house. Can you imagine what they were up to during the last few years? Every time you were out hunting, chatting about seashells and jellyfish. Hardly. Look how she's melting in his strong arms. A drog, a wild beast, fondling the curves of Kyoko's sweaty body, digging his claws between her wet thighs into her garden of pleasures. Do you like oysters, Asmund? Asmund lost his mind and saw himself draw a golden sword and slice them both with one blow into two messy halves. Their tongues continued to coil like slugs on the cobbled bridge, as their wet limbs remained clamped like clams. In reality, Hilda had paid the enamored couple on the bridge to passionately perform for her brother in exchange for many promises of wealth that she could keep once she became Queen of Helheim. In the meantime, Asmund fell to the floor, unconscious. Hilda had two other men she seduced in the Jolly Jormungandr carry Asmund's body to his home, south of Mooncastle, before dawn. The two gravediggers were eager to keep their mouths shut and fulfill Hilda's desires when she spoke of how easy it would be to have them live closer to the graveyards once she was officially instated as Queen of Helheim. How easier it would be for her to visit them once in a blue moon. Kyoko sat beside Peikar and Niji's tombs. She wouldn't be able to sleep on her back for days. Hopefully Nabori was asleep, and surely Liv was too. Who knows where Asmund had gone? A whisper shook her from her morbid dreams, and Hilda stood beside her. Dear Kyoko, not a day goes by without thinking of how terrible I would feel if the same tragedy had happened to Hedil and I. But I won't pretend to be living in Valhalla. Far from that. I need your help, Kyoko. What is it, Hilda? Replied Kyoko, as 1,000 whips struck her back as she stood up. Hedil, I've come to understand that you have learned to calm his drog impulses. I can't do it anymore. Hilda undid her light dress and showed self-inflicted scars on her chest. Please, do something. He'll be on the beach when the sun rises. He told me to get you, to tell you to join him where you usually go. I said I didn't mind if he would leave me alone. Please, Kyoko, I implore you. Hilda almost managed to shed a tear. If you insist, said Kyoko, touching Hilda's scarred skin. I must ask you, though, to stay here and make sure Asmund knows where I am. And if he's taken another bath in a barrel of ale, please protect Liv and the Bori. Of course, Kyoko. I will never forget what you've done for me. Now run before the crack of dawn. I wouldn't want him to wreak havoc in town, or even here. Rest assured, Hilda. I will do my best. Kyoko ached at every step of the way, down the lane, to the southern gate, along the coast, down the barnacled rocks, and over the moonlit sand. What was she doing? Why should she care what Hedil was doing during the night? Bakayero. When Kyoko was out of sight, Hilda slipped inside her home. Liv was fast asleep on a chair next to Nepori's bed. Her mouth was wide open, wide enough for a goldcrest to build its nest in, and made it much easier for Hilda to plop a few drops of deadly black henbane poison down Liv's throat. The babysitter didn't wake, and neither did the boy. Hilda tiptoed to where Kyoko kept her yukata rag and snipped a piece out with a kitchen knife. In the window, she saw her gravediggers drop Asmund's body outside near the 2 candlestick tombs. Hilda waited for them to leave after they emptied Asmund's pockets and quietly opened the front door to sit beside her brother. She stroked his boiling forehead as he snored, and she whispered an old song. Oh, Chris, you once stood before the Princess Drakor and blocked the fjord's old jaws. Ochre whalebone daggers. The prince's men you promised to give to famished run If only a narwhal tusk had not snapped inside your clan. Seagulls were doing their best to wake everyone south of the castle before dawn. Hilda waited for Asmund to come round and helped him with a pail of cold water.
Hilda, where is my wife?
Shush, Bradir. You will wake your only child. Kyoko is waiting for King Hedil on the beach. I was hiding here earlier on to clear my mind. I didn't want to believe they were truly seeing each other behind our backs. When Hedil passed by, looking for Kyoko again, he dropped this piece of fabric after blowing his nose. Asmund's rage was simmering. You will not be welcome here soon, bastard of Kronelgar.
Bastard,
said Asmund, with his head about to split into pieces. I will tell you about that later. We have more important and urgent issues, Brodir. Your wife on the beach with the king. Do you even know if these two were yours? Added Hilda, pointing to the child's graves. Asmund threw the strip of soiled yucca at Niji's tombstone and ran off towards the southern gate. Hilda waited again to hear the sound of her heart beating and crept back into her brother's home. She didn't leave empty-handed and did not forget the great gauntlet and the enormous blade of darkness. Perhaps it would shine for her as it did for the bug. Kyoko watched the reflected moon being cut to pieces again as the rising tide splashed her ankles. Every wave was a claw tearing through her veins. Every light breeze was a drog's fang ripping chunks out of her soft flesh. Every oyster catcher or sandpiper chirp was dragon fire flocking her spine. She wept and decided to use the haunted blade when she heard a man's footsteps in the wet sand behind her. Oh, Asmund, I thought it was Hedil. She hadn't weighed the gravity of each word that she pronounced, and the last one sank like a blunt knife into her husband's heart.
Ogress, how could I have been fooled for so many years? That bright light in the dark seas, it was you, wasn't it?
What do you mean, Asmund?
We followed the dancing light in the mist, hovering over the waves. The night we fished you from the icy sea. The light brought us to your frozen body, and a hole of dead sharks and other fish too. You enchanted us, servant of Ran, daughter of the mist.
No, you did, my dearest husband. I haven't felt anything like this since...
Since who?
growled Asmund. Kyoko suddenly remembered the raging storm on the coasts of Otarunai on Esu Island, tearing her forbidden lover away, limb by limb, destroying her home and village, killing every villager and wild beast, including the demon-faced macaques. The ghosts had warned her. At least the cold-blooded Hayashi would never break her heart again. A flicker of electricity spiraled around Kyoko's body and faded with a gust of wind. Asmund stared at her in horror and disbelief.
I knew it. Hildra was right. You are the evil that ripped me from my family, who tore the realms apart and spread the disease that's making us all go mad.
Kyoko was still in shock from the vision of what she had done to the man she once loved, while also admitting to being part of the unrest that had flown out of control since she arrived in Vanaheim. I know, Asmund. A sickly ghost reappeared, keeping his distance this time as he circled round the couple. The great Asmund, the Aurochs of Granelker. He was arrogant, but not as much as his cunning little brat sister. I never liked her. Oh, go away! Why? Because you won't have me whipped again? On your back? Or on his this time? You certainly know how to enjoy yourself, don't you? Just like your sister-in-law. You couldn't imagine what she gets up to behind the closed doors. No, I never liked her. And I see now why Agni mistreated her so. But I do envy her determination. Do you know what she's about to do to your child? Connor slithered closer and tried to lick her left eyeball. Get out of my face, you ugly rat! Asmund touched his scarred cheeks and thought one last time of what he had seen on the stone bridge, and pounced up to his wife, knocking her over into the sandy water. He grasped her thin neck with his left hand and tightened his grip until he almost squeezed the life out of her. When Kyoko smiled back and choked, what did you have to do? Asmund screamed out in terror and rolled onto his back beside his coughing wife. Her black hair swaying in the sea like bladder-wrack seaweed. A bright honey sun creeped over the eastern horizon and painted them gold. 6 of Hedil's guards splashed towards Asmund and drew their swords. One shoved the tip of his blade against Asmund's neck and ordered him to stay still, while the others helped Kyoko to her feet. "Don't hurt him. she cried. "We're not here for that," said the guard, making sure Asmund wouldn't move. "King Hedil sent us to inform you that his son has been taken hostage, as well as your own. We are to escort you to Vigrid Plains immediately, where Hilda has taken them. You will be taken there to be buried alive, or undead, in the Garden of Idun, when the moon is full."
What is this hogwash?
said Asmund, pushing the sword aside. The ghost of Gunnar slithered over Asmund's chest and whispered,
I told you so. She's as ruthless as this one is broken.
"Don't worry, my dear. Drag me there and do as he says. Napori needs you. And besides, I see why you wouldn't want me anymore after I let our other children die."
You flaming witch. Why would you ask me that?
replied the whimpering Asmund.
What is wrong with everyone?
"If you ever loved me," said Kyoko, trying to speak despite an acute pain in her throat and back, "bury me there, I don't care. And I will explain all I can of the evil here in these lands. And who your sister really is."
What about your precious Hedil?
Kyoko winced as she splashed forwards in the rising tide and slapped Asmund. "Stop that foolishness! Can't you see what's true anymore?" she said with watery eyes. Asmund didn't know who to believe. All he could think of was Napori and the price Kyoko was willing to pay to keep him safe, despite his sister's insane demands. He reached forwards to hug her, but the guard bashed his hands out of the way. "It's all right. Leave him be," said Kyoko, gesturing the guards to go away. Asmund got up and held Kyoko with his one arm, burying his forehead in her wet kimono. Kyoko flinched when his fingers touched her back, and Asmund only just noticed the blooming blood stains in his wife's garment. He took a peek inside her kimono and gasped.
Who did this to you, Kyoko? What happened?
"Does it matter? My husband, who was about to strangle me in the waves where we first met. When our son is in danger and needs his mother and father." Asmund insisted and made her show him the open wounds.
Was it him?
He said with gleaming orange hatred in his eyes.
He did this to you, didn't he? After your encounter by the stream last night.
Hedil? I haven't seen him all day, you oaf. We don't have time for these lunacies. Ride me to Vigrid Plains. I'll explain on the way, my husband.
We have orders to escort you. I'll escort you to your graves if you don't give me one of your horses. And let us go there right away,
growled Asmund. We will do as the king and Hilda demand. Asmund will bury me alive, and he will bring home the king's son. And Napori, said Kyoko with determination. And you can go to hell, she thought.
But I've been there already, and they sent me back. Such fun awaits us,
said Gunnar. Kyoko let Asmund carry her to one of the guard's horses and whispered over her shoulder, "Enjoy your last moments of peace, for soon I will be there to entertain you myself. Ask my first love about the fun we used to have by the beach. If you can find his shredded body parts anywhere." Four small hands slipped out of the sand and snatched Gunnar's shadowy legs. They shrieked with joy and radiated trembling sparks of lightning as they pulled him underwater, beneath the sand, and down to where no spirit ever escapes. Kyoko shivered as she rode away, clinging to Asmund's warm back on this bleak morn. In the great hall of Helheim's castle, King Hedil was uncertain of how to save his heir. A piece of slate that a strange couple had given him was a clear sign from his beloved of the place where they used to meet. It bore a symbolic first quarter moon that looked like an apple half eaten over a flat line, referring to Vigrid Plains. The message delivered couldn't have come from anyone else, unless the Garden of Idun had ears. The woman with black hair repeated Hilda's words. "Bring me the Drog Tamer to our bed of lost smiles, and bury her undead under the full moon. Disobey me, and our little dragon dies like her runt." Harald advised caution. The plains were still riddled with swarms of the undead. Refer suggested they use this woe to their advantage. Rally the troops in black to save the king's child and drive the undead into oblivion with their fabulous weapons. The mist wouldn't harm them, and their warriors could finally be rewarded in Valhalla. Hedil hated the idea of turning his son's hostage situation into a sacred battle against the dark forces of Nebelwood, but he knew Refer was right. They had by chance extracted more destructive arms from the black leather bag he had taken from the Nibelungen Mountains, and his people and Refer's just needed an emotional excuse to sacrifice their lives and cleanse their lands for good for generations to come. And Kyoko was on her way to the grave. The battle would perhaps help them through the plague to save the young Nidhogger in the Garden of Idun. See you next time for chapter 20 of the Hidden Chronicles. Thank you for watching.